Where are Nigeria's stolen funds? And what do you make of federal government's disclosure that 1.34 trillion naira has been looted from Nigeria's coffers in 7 years? There are strong indications that most of these stolen funds are stashed in foreign accounts. How can these stolen public funds be recovered? Some would say this is merely scratching the surface of the massive looting that have plundered the nation's treasury. What is the federal government doing to recover the stolen funds, and what is the role of Nigeria's foreign ministry in the recovery of stolen funds? Welcome to Question Time. I'm Benga Ashiru. You may also join in this conversation by sending us a comment on our various social media platforms showing on your screen. The Nigeria's foreign ministry is expected to play a front role in the recovery of stolen funds taken away to foreign countries in this administration. Channels TV heads to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where we met the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jeffrey Onyama. It says the ministry has been able to fast-track the return of $730 million while also working on the return of another $321 million. The foreign minister also discloses that the federal government is working on an international collaboration to work out a mutual assistance. Dr. Jeffrey Onyema, thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Question Time.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Now, let's start by looking at what Nigeria's foreign policy thrust is in this administration.
Essentially, the foreign policy thrust is based around the three pillars of this government, the three priority areas defined and articulated by Mr. President. And taking them one at a time, as far as security is concerned, we know that security is a global issue at the moment, the issue of global terrorism and so forth. But we also in this country are facing very real and I would say existential security issues. And so as a first step, we are cooperating with our neighbors in dealing with the very real security issues that we are facing in this country and also that our neighboring countries are facing. Now, this is being addressed within a formal structure and framework, the multinational joint task force with some of the neighboring countries and also in the framework of the Lake Chad Basin Commission. So we are working with neighboring countries in addressing the security challenges here. And I must say that a lot of progress and indeed success has been achieved since this administration came on. And to the extent that really the Boko Haram has now been seriously, its capacity seriously diminished to cause a major threat to the state. And we see that now it's really limited to a very large extent to individual attacks and so forth.
Now, looking at the area of security now, which you said is one of the key areas in your foreign policy trust, the federal government promised that it was going to end the war, win the war against insurgency the last December, but we still see some attacks. Are we going to base this yardstick on the capacity of the military to decimate the potential of the Boko Haram to unleash their terror attack, or is it going to be an eventual victory for the federal government and Nigeria as a nation?
You know, everything is relative. The capacity of Boko Haram has been severely degraded. And of course, as we found out around the world, you will probably always have individual threats. An individual, especially with the evolution of technology today, can make improvised weapons, and if people are prepared to detonate these weapons on themselves while carrying them as suicide bombers and so forth. That's always going to be a risk and a challenge that is there. But I think that when Mr. President is talking about winning the war, I think first and foremost we have to be looking at the conventional war situation in which this country was in a matter of some months ago, where you had an adversary that was taking and holding territory and confronting our military forces head on in almost, you would say, in a conventional warfare situation. So that posed an existential threat to the integrity and survival of this country. And I think to that extent, Mr. President is absolutely correct that by December, the capacity of the adversary to function in that capacity, taking on our military, in a conventional manner, taking territory, holding on to territory, has now been completely eliminated.
Would you be considering the option of dialogue while dealing with insurgents?
Well, first and foremost, you have to, I think all the options have to be there, have to be on the table and open. And if dialogue, you can identify true representatives of your enemies, your adversaries, that you can engage in dialogue with, and that will bring peace. I think, of course, that is an option that has to be explored.
For a long time, Africa has been the centerpiece of Nigeria's foreign policy thrust. In this administration, would there be any major shift in line of a policy directive?
No, Africa will continue to be the centerpiece of our foreign policy. There won't be a shift, a marked shift from that. For a number of reasons. I think Nigeria is looked up to by a lot of most of the African countries as a leader on this continent. And for that reason and the fact of proximity and a lot of shared values and culture, we absolutely have to retain Africa as a centerpiece of our foreign policy.
Let's look at the question of reciprocity and the issue of our engagement in the Africa and regional affairs. People believe that they can't really put a finger on the gains, that we don't get as much as we give to other African nations.
Well, of course, if your neighbors are at peace, you have an immediate benefit from that. Spillover effects and so forth. The goodwill that is generated, very often some of these benefits cannot be quantified in monetary terms per se, but they will be manifested in a lot of different ways. The goodwill you get from a lot of these countries, and also the desiderata for Africa. What we, I think, all desire in Africa is to have a united Africa, greater integration, economic integration, and ultimately political integration. We see this as one of the goals of the African Union. Now, if you're going to be moving towards any kind of integration and those kinds of lofty goals, then you have to have, at the base, a groundswell of goodwill and friendly, and I would say fraternal disposition one to the other. So in the investment that Nigeria has made in human resources, financial resources, in ensuring that our African brothers are in peace, will help towards achieving those goals.
There is a perception of a dwindling influence of Nigeria as a nation within the AU. What's your reaction to this?
I mean, it depends how, what you mean by influence, but I wouldn't agree at all. I think Nigeria is still extremely respected within the African Union, within Africa. Nigeria's opinion is sought, and I have had the honor and privilege to have accompanied Mr. President on a number of major events on the African continent, indeed where almost all the African leaders have participated. So I have witnessed at first hand the respect that the other African countries and leaders have for Nigeria and Nigeria's leadership, and indeed the expectations that they have of Nigeria, and which clearly show the esteem in which they hold this country.
You can also be part of this conversation by sending us your comments on our various social media platforms showing on your screen. Coming up on Question Time, what is Nigeria's agenda for the forthcoming African Union Summit? We'll find out from Nigeria's foreign minister when we return.